Welcome back. This is section 4 of chapter 1 on adding integers. We will begin on page 41 in your book if you care to follow along. And I'm going to teach you just a couple of different methods for adding integers, and you will get to choose which of those you like the best. I have a preference for this first method. I think it's the easiest and there's less opportunity for error. So here we go, adding integers with the same sign. The first method, what I'm going to have you do is to make what's called like this small T-chart down here, where you have a plus and a minus. See how I have a plus on the left and a minus on the right and a T? And you're going to put the numbers in the column according to what sign is in front of it. So we have a -4 and a -2. So both of those numbers will go on the right-hand side where the negative column is. And then the next thing you're going to do, if they're on the same side here, we're going to add the numbers. 4 plus 2 gives us 6. And finally, we're going to keep the sign of whatever column we are in for our answer. Since the 6 is in the negative column, the answer is then a -6. All right, the second method, which is one of the methods that is taught in your book. That first method is not presented in your book. That's just something I've added as I've learned. The second method has to do with using the absolute values. And to add integers that have the same sign, what we're going to do is take the absolute value of each of those and add them. So here you'll see the -4 absolute value in the vertical lines and -2's absolute value. We're going to add those two together. The absolute value of -4 is +4. The absolute value of -2 is +2. Okay, then we're going to add those absolute values together and we get a +6. Here's the reason I don't like this method. But then we need to make sure that the sum has the same sign as the integers that we began with. So we began with -4 and -2, so our answer needs to be a -6. And I have found that students sometimes forget to go back and do that last method or the last step where you change the sign. So that's the downfall of that method. Finally, the third method here is to use a number line. This method's also very good. If I were you, I would use either the first or third method. And this method says to start by using a number line, and we start at 0. Okay, so here's 0 right here where we're going to start. And then remember we're adding -4 and -2. So -4 from 0 would be to the left. Negative numbers are to the left of 0, positive is to the right. So we're going to move -4 and we're ending up here at -4, but then we need to add to that -4 a -2. And since it's negative, we're going to go more to the left, 2 more units. So then when we add -4 and -2, where do we end up? Well, we end up at -6. All right. Adding integers with different signs. The last example, they both had the same sign. What happens if those signs of the integers are different? Well, let's take a look. Using the first method with the T-chart, what we're going to do is we're still going to place the numbers in the column according to whatever sign they have. But remember, we don't include the sign. This is the second example. It says find 5 plus -2. 5 is positive. It goes on the left column with the positive numbers. 2 is negative. It goes on the right column. Now here is the rule when you have different signs. We move the smaller number under the larger number. Since 2 is smaller than 5, we're going to move it over to that other column under the plus side just because it's smaller. Then instead of adding, we are going to subtract the numbers. 5 minus 2, that gives us an answer of 3. And lastly, to find the sign of our answer, it's whatever column we're in. Okay, we're in the plus column over here, so 3 is positive. Again, I think that's a pretty simple method and doesn't leave a lot of room for error. Second method, using absolute values. It says to add integers with different signs, subtract their absolute values. Okay, so the sum has the same sign as the integer with a greater absolute value. So here we go, same problem, 5 plus a -2. The absolute value of 5, subtract the absolute value of -2. Well, the absolute value of 5 is 5. The absolute value of -2 is +2, and we subtract those and end up with +3. Okay, now again, the sum has the same sign as the integer with the greater absolute value. Well, 5 was bigger than -2, so we're going to keep that as a positive. Again, students tend to forget about the sign in the end, so I really don't like that method. Method number 3, using the number line. Starting at 0 again. 5 is a positive number, so we are going to go to the right 5 units from 0. So here we go on the red line over to +5. Then we're going to add a -2. Now 2 is negative, so that will go in the left direction from 5. So we're at 5, and now we're going to turn around and go the other way. 2 units to the left. Where do we end up right here? We end up at +3. So our answer is a +3. Two numbers with the same absolute value but different signs are called opposites. And an example is -2 and +2. Those two numbers are opposites. Okay? And we know some properties about opposites. An integer and its opposite are also called additive inverses. Okay, and here's in words what that means. The sum of any number and its additive inverse is always 0. Here's an example with numbers. 7 plus a -7 gives you 0. And if in algebra, if you have a variable, x plus the opposite of x is always 0 as well. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of background on the additive inverse property. Well, here's where we use the additive inverse property. Here's an example where we're going to add 3 integers together. We have -4 plus a -12 plus a +4. Well, one of the things that we could do is we could rearrange the order of the adding of those numbers so that the -4 and the +4 are added first. And you can recall that that was the commutative property when we changed the order. Well, -4 and +4 from our additive inverse property, those add to 0. And then we can add the -12. Well, 0 plus a -12 is -12. Okay? So use that to your advantage to be able to do make the math a little bit easier. Here's a word problem. Eric's savings account balance is $235. What is his balance after he uses the ATM to withdraw $58.67? Well, what happens when you withdraw money? Does the amount of money you have go up or down? Well, withdrawing money is a decrease in the amount of money you have, so we're going to consider those as negative numbers. So -58 and -67. And we're going to add those two together first, and then add the result to what we started with $235. So we're starting with 235. We're going to add -58 and -67. When you add those two negative integers, it gives you -125. Well, it's a good thing this number, -125, is smaller than 235 because you'll still have money left over then. And when you add those together, you get 110. So his new balance is $110. Now, I think the easiest way to do that would have been to use the T-chart if you're going to work that out using one of the 3 methods that I had shown you. And your assignment then is to go ahead and fill in your notables for this lesson 1, 4, and we will work on the assignment in class. See ya!